All right, fifth graders, welcome to social studies. We're in a super exciting time. We are gearing up for the Revolutionary War. If you remember last time, we talked about how the King of England was imposing taxes on the colonists. And remember, the king lived in England and the colonists lived in the Americas. And there was an Atlantic Ocean between, but the king wanted more money. And so he kept charging taxes. Remember this? Okay. So and the people were like, no, it wasn't fair. They had no one there to represent them. So they had this phrase, no taxation without representation. They're saying, you can't charge us taxes. We don't even get a vote because the voting was done in England and you had to live in England to vote. So this made the colonists more and more and more angry. The king told them they couldn't go past a certain mountain range. The king told them they had to pay tax on every piece of paper. They had to have soldiers live in their house. It's called the Quartering Act. They had another one that the Townsend Acts, where they had to pay tax on glass and on lead and on paper again, and some other things. So this was making the colonists very angry. Well, you can imagine, you got the more taxes that the king imposed, the more soldiers he sent, and the more soldiers, the tensions got high. The soldiers are living in their houses; they can't get away from them, and they're feeling oppressed and taxed, and like, this is not why we came to these colonies. We came to these colonies for freedom and to not be under the king's rule all the time. So you can imagine things were building, tensions were getting high, and that's what we're going to pick up today. And I'm going to jump into the screen share a little bit because there's a ton of stuff in here. So let's go. You're at Studies Weekly here, and here's your Social Studies and Science. Well, this is Social Studies, so let's click on that. And it is we are still in lesson 11 right here. Week 11, the Acts of Parliament. We didn't finish this. If you remember, last time we only read a couple articles and we didn't have the test yet. You can see now the test is active because after today's reading and discussion, you're going to take the test. I'm going to go through every single test question with you, so stick around, watch the rest of the video, and make sure you're ready to go. Make sure you highlight everything that I show you to highlight. So let's click on that. Last week we read the first two, King George and the Acts of Parliament. We read these two. And I'm going to scroll through. So you got your pen handy or got your highlighter handy so you can highlight. These are test questions. Ready? Here we go. So let's scroll through. Right there. See, whatever is in pink. Whatever is in pink is test questions. There is a test question that reads, what was the role of British Parliament in the colonies? We'll read right here. Parliament creates and collects taxes. Parliament makes laws. See right here, this is where I am, right there. See that? How it just went from not pink to pink. Now not pink. We'll make it pink again. Pink. Okay, that's one of your questions. What was the role of Parliament? To make laws and collect taxes. Here's another one. This was another text where I just said this one. The only people, right here, the only people that could vote were the ones who lived in Great Britain. Only people living in Great Britain got to vote. And what was the job of Parliament? Laws and taxes. So there, ladies and gentlemen, are two test questions. Only the people in Great Britain could vote, and Parliament made laws and taxes. Keep scrolling down. Why did the king start charging taxes? Right here. They realized they didn't have enough money for the war. See that right there? They realized they didn't have enough money for the war. Now I want to point out something on this one. This is a short answer question. It reads, let me find it. Why did Parliament decide to raise taxes in the American colonies? Well, this is where you need to say, according to the article, right here. According to the article, they realized they didn't have enough money to pay for the war. And that was the French and Indian War. Notice I have that in yellow. So the question is, why did Parliament decide to raise taxes? The article says they didn't have enough money to pay the expenses from the war. That's your answer right there, okay? So I've so far given you Parliament. Their job was to create laws and collect taxes. Who got to vote? Only those living in Great Britain. Why did Parliament raise taxes? Because according to the article, they didn't have enough money for the war. So there's three questions so far, okay? Now, here's another one. See this one right here, or down here. The British soldiers called regulars, okay? These British soldiers were called regulars, right here. And what was their job? They lived in the colonies to protect citizens and help regulate taxes. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is another short answer question. It reads like this. Why were the British soldiers known as regulars assigned to the colonies? You're going to say, according to the article, the regulars were assigned to protect citizens and help regulate taxes. It's right there in the article. According to the article, the regulars were there to protect citizens and help regulate taxes. That's that one right there. Okay? So that first article that we read last week has, count the pink, 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Yep, 4 questions that are in pink, and 2 of them are short answer questions. This last one, just remember the word taxes. There's a test question that says, what was most of the acts of Parliament toward the colonies involved? Taxes. Just remember taxes, taxes, taxes. So there's the 5th one. 5 questions in that first article that we read last week. So make sure you got all that pink. Okay? All right, last week we also read this one, the acts of Parliament and colonial responses. This pink just says again, taxes, taxes, taxes. Remember, most of the acts of Parliaments involved taxes. But then we have a problem. There was no one there to represent the colonists. Remember, this made them angry. So they came up with a phrase. And what was their phrase? Here it is in pink. No taxation without representation. In other words, you can't tax us because we have no one there. It was a repetitive answer that they said every time Parliament had a new action. Right here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is another test question. It asks you, what was the phrase they came up with, they said after every new tax? No taxation without representation. So there's the next test question. Then we looked closely at this big picture and we talked about the Stamp Act, which is right here. The one with the skull and crossbones. And what did the Stamp Act tax? The Stamp Act taxed paper. Right here. Okay? Paper, 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 paper. See if I can get it down. There we go. Right here. So you need to know that. That's, here we go. It's a test question. It reads like this. The Stamp Act was a tax on paper, all paper products. The Quartering Act was right here. That's also a test question. This one here, that means the soldiers get to stay here. So I'll read it to you. What was the effect of the Quartering Act? It forced colonists to provide food and housing. In other words, you had to take them in. You had to let them live in your house. You had to feed them. So the Quartering Act is not about money. It is not about quarters. It's about providing living quarters, a place to live for the soldiers, providing them food and housing. So remember that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have gone over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 10 test questions already in just the first 2 articles that we read last week. So you need to go back and look at those because the test is today. You need to review. Now, what was the economic action? There's one more. I'm going to go to the 9th one right here. What was the economic action? Well, we read that right here. What did they do? Boycott. Remember that word boycott? Trying to find it if I can find it big for you right here. Here's the word boycott right there. And then there's another word right there. Massachusetts. Sorry, I'm trying to get that down. Massachusetts urges colonies to boycott British goods. Remember that word boycott. The test question reads like this. What was the economic action colonists took to impact British goods? They boycotted. Boycotted means we refuse to buy. We are going to buy from somebody else. We are not going to buy your stuff. Okay? All right. That, ladies and gentlemen, is 9 out of 10 test questions, and that's from last week's lesson. So there's one more test question you need, and it's in the next, another article. So what happened? Here's, notice I have in pink, over the next 2 years, the British regulars lived in people's private homes. That's the Quartering Act, don't forget. All right, but here's what I want to bring up. Here's today's lesson, okay? That was all review for the test. Today's lesson, your job is to read these 2 articles, the Boston Massacre and Crispus Attucks. These two articles right here, the Boston Massacre and Crispus Attucks. And then when you're done with that, make sure you go back and review, find all your pink, and right here, take the test, okay? But what happened? Think about this. You've had soldiers living in your house. You're being taxed on everything. You can't get anything you want. People are, more and more soldiers keep living. Or do you think things might have gotten a little bit testy? People might have gotten angry with each other. And that is exactly what happened. And it was something called the Boston Massacre. And it's considered the first person who was killed in the American Revolution happened at the Boston Massacre. Well, so when you read the Boston Massacre, it's right here, okay? And what happened was there had soldiers on the street, and there were colonists walking down, and somewhere somebody threw a snowball. Somebody threw a snowball at the soldiers, and the soldiers got mad. And the story goes that they fired their guns, and then people fired at each other. And that was the first hostile action. The Boston, and about 4 or 5 people were killed. And obviously this made people very upset, okay? So your job is to read this article here, and it talks about, like there you see someone fell to the ground, fired. So 5 civilians died as a result. 3 died on the scene, 2 died later. So your job is to read this article, the Boston Massacre. Now I've highlighted in yellow, loyalists are those loyal to England, patriots are wanted to be independents. That's a sneak peek for next lesson. Okay, but here's the test question, the 10th test question we haven't got to. Who was the first victim? Right here, the victims of the massacre, Crispus Attucks. He's considered the first person to have been killed in the Revolutionary War. He was a man of color, African American man, and he was the first one killed. So that you need to know in pink. So you're going to read this one, Boston Massacre. But I'm going to tell you, you just shouldn't just read it. You need to watch the video. So click over here where it says watch video. You're going to want to watch this video because it brings it more to life. Okay? And then underneath the purple explore more, there's some pictures. There's a picture of Paul Revere. There he is right there. There's a picture of this is the video that I want you to watch. It's a picture of the Boston Massacre grave and a picture of where it actually happened in Boston, out in front of this building right here. Okay? But what I want to point out to you is Paul Revere, let me find him. Paul Revere was a patriot. He wanted independence from Great Britain. And he was also an engraver. So after the Boston Massacre happened, he wanted to make sure people knew we need to fight. He wanted to make sure that people said, this is a bad thing. We don't like the British. We don't want them to be here. So he created a picture. And his picture looks like this right here. It's this one here that you see at the cover of the video. I'm trying to, oh, you know what? I know where it is. Let's go back to the articles. It's much better right here. This was Paul Revere's picture. Take a look at that picture. Who do you think is the aggressive? Is it the ones in the red coats, the British soldiers, or is it these colonists over here? It looks very clearly like the British are being the aggressive, doesn't it? It looks like they're lined up in a row, firing their guns. This guy's saying, fire! And these guys are standing there. I don't even see a gun. And I see a woman here, it looks like, and they're just lying there and they're dying. Well, what effect do you think this had? Paul Revere made this engraving, then he printed a bunch of paper copies of it, spread them all over the colonies. Do you think the colonists would be like, oh, those poor people, that was such a bad thing? No, they were angry. They were angry at the British. How dare those British soldiers attack our people? Our people didn't do anything wrong, and they just attacked them. This stirred up the desire to battle and to go to war. So that was his picture. Now, I want to show you another picture. Let's go back to the Explore More. Here is another drawing of it. Take a look at this one. Who does it look like is the aggressor in this one? These are the British soldiers. These are the colonists. Who looks aggressive? It looks like the colonists are the aggressors, the ones causing the fight. It looks like the British soldiers are standing back to back in a defensive position trying to protect themselves. Well, this was another drawing of the same Boston Massacre. So the question is, which is the true story? Is this what happened? Were the colonists the aggressors? We think the colonists threw a snowball. Or was the British soldiers the aggressors? Was Paul Revere's picture accurate? And that is it's something called propaganda. It's putting out pictures to get people to believe something. So again, this is the one view where the soldiers look like they are in defensive, and then Paul Revere's picture, the soldiers are the attackers. So let me go back to the article. You're going to read Boston Massacre, read this whole thing. In fact, if you want, you might click the button and have it read out loud to you, just because there's some dialogue and it might sound really cool. Definitely watch this video. It's much more interesting. And then go to the Explore More button and look at the drawings, and you can check out those different things there. And there are extra quizzes here. Take these quizzes. You need to do the quiz at the end of the article right here. That'll help you practice for your test. But if you do the coins after the video and those pictures, you get extra coins to work on your little character and the land up here, the fun things you get to do with your character. Okay? So that's job number 1, read Boston Massacre, watch the video. Job number 2, read Crispus Attucks. Here's the young man, and he was 27 years old. And right here, he was known as a hero who stood up, he died for his freedom. And here's the test question. He was the first to fall. So read this and take the little questions at the end. Okay, so that's your assignment. Ready? Here you go. I'll go over it one more time. Boston Massacre. Read the article, take the mini quiz. Definitely watch the video, and you can click on Explore More to see the pictures. Crispus Attucks. Read this one, take your mini quiz. Make sure you go back through the first 2 articles and look at all those pink highlights and get your test answers, and then come right here and take the test. Okay, I've gone through quite a bit of it with you, so hopefully the reading will be easy. And one last thing, after this Boston Massacre, do you think things calmed down? No, things got even worse, and that's our next lesson. So without further ado, go to it, go do your reading, get all the information you need so you know, and we'll get ready for the next lesson, where how did we respond to the Boston Massacre? See you later.